March 2001. The Bombay Stock Exchange is bleeding. Thousands of investors are watching their life savings evaporate in real time. Screens are flashing red. Phones are ringing off the hook. Brokers are crying on the trading floor. In 72 hours, over 30,000 crore rupees in market value has simply vanished. And somewhere in Mumbai, a 35-year-old chartered accountant, well-dressed, soft-spoken, seemingly unremarkable, is sitting very, very quietly. His name is Ketan Parekh. And in the previous 3 years, this man had done something no one thought was possible. He had taken a handful of obscure, worthless stocks and turned them into market darlings worth thousands of crores. He had convinced banks, promoters, and an entire nation of retail investors that he was the next big thing. He was called the Pied Piper of Dalal Street. But every piper eventually stops playing. And when Ketan Parekh stopped, the crash that followed was so devastating, so total, that it changed Indian financial regulation forever. This is not just a story about greed. This is a story about how one man gamed an entire system. And how that system let him. You need to understand where this man came from. Because the most dangerous fraudsters are never the obvious ones. Ketan Parekh was born into a Gujarati Baniya family with a modest but established brokerage background. His father ran a small broking firm, Classic Share and Stock Brokers, on Dalal Street. Ketan inherited it. He was not a flashy man. No Lamborghinis. No page 3 parties. In fact, people who met him described him as quiet, almost cerebral. He had a gift, a genuine one, for spotting emerging technology and media companies in the late 1990s. Remember, this was the era of the dot-com bubble. The Nasdaq was touching 5,000. The world had gone mad for anything with a dot-com attached to it. India was not immune. Between 1998 and 2000, Ketan Parekh built a reputation as a visionary. He picked stocks in companies like Himachal Futuristic Communications, HFCL, and Z Telefilms and Global Telesystems. These were real companies, but small. Lightly traded. With thin shareholding and low public float. That last detail, thin float, is the key to everything. Because if a stock has very few shares available in the market, it doesn't take much money to move the price. And Ketan Parekh understood this better than almost anyone alive. He began acquiring massive positions in a concentrated group of stocks. The market started calling them the K10 stocks. And what happened next was textbook manipulation, executed at a scale India had never seen before. Here is how the scheme worked. And I want you to follow this carefully because the mechanics are both simple and terrifying. Ketan Parekh would buy large quantities of a K10 stock. The price would rise. Other investors, seeing the rise, would pile in. The price would rise further. Ketan would use those inflated shares as collateral to borrow money from banks and non-banking finance companies. Then he would use that borrowed money to buy even more of the same stock. Round and round. This is called circular trading or daisy chain borrowing. But here's where it becomes truly criminal. He wasn't just using his own money or borrowed money. He had allegedly roped in the promoters of these very companies. Promoters would give him shares. He would pump the price. They would all benefit. The Bombay Stock Exchange's Badla system, a form of carry-forward trading that existed at the time, made this even easier to execute at scale. Now add the banks. This is the part that still makes my sources inside the ED shake their heads. The Madhavpura Mercantile Cooperative Bank in Ahmedabad, a small, relatively obscure bank, allegedly issued pay orders worth over 800 crore rupees to Ketan Parekh, far beyond its legal lending limits. The Global Trust Bank also extended massive credit lines. By late 2000, estimates suggest Ketan had manipulated the prices of K10 stocks to the tune of 1,250 crore rupees in fraudulent market activity. HFCL alone went from around 100 rupee to over 2,500 rupee per share. The inflation was not organic. It was engineered. And tens of thousands of retail investors, small-town traders, government employees, housewives investing their savings had followed the Pied Piper right to the edge of a cliff. February 2001. The global dot-com bubble had already burst in America. The Nasdaq had fallen 60% from its peak. And the tremors were reaching India. Foreign institutional investors, the FIIs, started pulling money out. The K10 stocks, with no real fundamental support for their inflated valuations, began to crack. Ketan needed to keep buying to keep the prices up. But the banks were getting nervous. Credit was tightening. And on 22nd February 2001, one of the darkest days in BSE history, a payment crisis hit. Ketan Parekh's broking entities could not meet settlement obligations. The exchange fell into chaos. What followed was a crash of historic proportions. HFCL fell from 2,500 rupee to under 200 rupees in weeks. Pentamedia Graphics, Global Telesystems, Aftek Infosys, all collapsed. 30,000 crore rupees in market capitalization gone. The Madhavpura Mercantile Cooperative Bank, which had essentially bet its entire existence on Ketan Parekh, was placed under RBI restrictions. Thousands of depositors, ordinary people in Gujarat, could not withdraw their own money. Some of them had their entire life savings locked inside that bank. I spoke to a retired teacher from Ahmedabad years later who told me he lost 4 lakh rupees, his entire provident fund, when Madhavpura collapsed. He said, हमने सुना था कि शेयर मार्केट में पैसा बनाना होता है. हमें नहीं पता था कि कोई हमारा पैसा भी ले जाएगा. We thought you could make money in the stock market. We didn't know someone could take our money too. That one sentence tells you everything about why financial fraud is not a victimless crime. When something of this scale happens, the agencies move. SEBI, the Securities and Exchange Board of India, launched an investigation almost immediately. What they found was staggering in its scope and complexity. SEBI's forensic trail led them through dozens of front companies, layered bank transactions, and a network of brokers and promoters who had allegedly benefited from Parekh's price rigging. The CBI registered multiple cases. The Enforcement Directorate began following the money trail under FEMA, the Foreign Exchange Management Act, investigating whether funds had been moved offshore. SEBI's Joint Parliamentary Committee inquiry, which submitted its report in December 2002, was one of the most damning official documents I have ever read. It named names. It identified systemic failures. It found that the Badla system had been fatally misused. It found that cooperative banks had operated with virtually no regulatory oversight, a loophole that still sends a chill down my spine. In March 2001, Ketan Parekh was arrested by the CBI. He was charged under sections 420 and 120B of the IPC, cheating and criminal conspiracy. Banks that had extended illegal credit were penalized. RBI took action against Global Trust Bank, which was eventually forcibly merged with Oriental Bank of Commerce in 2004, a merger that wiped out Global Trust Bank's shareholders completely. SEBI permanently banned Ketan Parekh from trading in Indian securities markets. His passport was impounded. But here is what still puzzles investigators I have spoken to: the full network of beneficiaries, the promoters, the middlemen, the political connections some allege existed, was never fully prosecuted. The fish was caught. The net remained intact. This is the part of the story that is hardest to tell. Because for all the investigations, all the arrests, all the parliamentary inquiries, the judicial process moved at the pace that Indian courts are, tragically, known for. Ketan Parekh was convicted by a special CBI court in Mumbai in April 2014, 13 years after the crash. He was sentenced to 2 years of rigorous imprisonment in connection with the Madhavpura Bank fraud case. He was also fined. But consider that number. 13 years. The victims had already lived through the wreckage for over a decade before a verdict came. And even that verdict addressed only one slice of the total alleged criminality. Multiple cases remain in various stages of litigation even as I record this. SEBI's ban on Parekh remains in force. He is not permitted to trade in Indian markets. As of the latest information available, Parekh has been reported to be residing abroad for extended periods, a fact that frustrates investigators who feel full asset recovery has never been achieved. The Madhavpura Bank never truly recovered. It was eventually merged under RBI direction. Depositors received partial compensation, but partial is a cold word when you've lost your retirement savings. The broader lesson: the scam directly led to sweeping changes. SEBI was given enhanced powers. The Badla system was abolished in 2001 permanently. Cooperative bank lending to brokers was brought under stricter RBI oversight. The circuit breaker system on Indian exchanges was strengthened. These are not small changes. They are the architecture of a safer market, built on the ruins of the lives that Ketan Parekh's ambition destroyed. एक इंसान की लालच ने पूरा बाजार बादल दिया. One man's greed changed an entire marketplace. The Ketan Parekh scam is not ancient history. It is a blueprint of how markets can be gamed, how regulators can be blinded, and how ordinary people pay for extraordinary greed. Every time you invest in a stock with no fundamentals but a rapidly rising price, remember this story. तंबाकू की तरह होता है ये, seductive, slow, and deadly. If this episode made you think, made you angry, made you smarter, share it with one person who needs to hear it. Subscribe to the channel. And if you want to go deeper into India's greatest financial crimes, the link is below. मैं विक्रम हूँ और सच बोलना मेरा काम है.